I put too much pressure on myself sometimes to make deep or super thoughtful videos. I might be a little bit unmasked or off the cuff in this video, and I'm gonna try to just be okay with that instead of trying to be perfect all the time. Okay, this is the Winter Solstice Tarot tag. Anti-K's Tarot made this tag last year. This tag is just a bunch of prompts that we can assign different decks to. I responded to this tag last year with tarot decks, and this time I pulled some oracle decks. Okay, I don't need to preamble more, so let's just get into it. The first prompt is Longest Night, a deck that gets you through long nights and cold days, a workhorse deck. The deck I've whipped out here is the Poesis Oracle. This deck is created by Andrea Wan, so fellow Asian artist. I don't want to assume that they're American. I bought this deck in person at the Tarot Arts store in Pasadena, California. Tarot Arts has been an online store for tarot decks for many, many years, and they opened their physical location relatively recently. I want to say in the past year or couple of years. So I went there with some friends earlier this year, way back in March. Again, the store is in Pasadena, so it's a little bit of a trek from where I am, but for friendship, I will drive. And that's a very SoCal, very LA thing to say. You just gotta drive 30 minutes to an hour to get anywhere in LA. That's just how it is. Anyway, the Tarot Art Store has a bunch of opened decks that you can look at. It's really nice to be able to feel a deck in your hand so that you understand what the deck feel is going to be like, what the cardstock is going to be like. And of course, you get to sample the art and see how the art vibes with you before you buy the entire deck. And especially with indie decks, yeah, it's really nice to be able to look at these decks first before we buy them. So many metaphysical shops or tarot shops will only stock mass market decks. So it is really nice to find indie decks in stores. So thank you Tarot Arts and any other physical retail store that does stock indie decks. Anyway, so the Poesis Oracle really stood out to me. I had heard of it before, but I had not really looked at many of the cards in videos online. When I saw these cards in person, I was mesmerized. Andrea Wan created this deck, and Megan King wrote the poetry. So you can go to this website, poesis-oracle.com/library, and you can read poems that are associated with every single card. And some of these poems are really beautiful. And I'm not someone who reads poetry that often, so I get to have it in like small doses when I feel like it, when I feel like looking up these cards. So yeah, the art in these cards feels very evocative for me. It feels very intuitive for me. I can also read it very neutrally, like in a positive way or in a negative way. And I find that a lot of Oracle decks, it's hard for me to read neutrally, so I do appreciate that not only are the keywords neutral, but the art accompanying each keyword is also very neutral. Let's say practice, for example, right? So first of all, I love the depiction of practice here, like doing something over and over, possibly doing something like in community. We could read this card as if this was the same person doing the same action and maybe getting bigger, getting better every time. If we read this positively, it could be a reminder, a reinforcement, and advice of keep doing things little by little. I also see like this person is almost looking like at themselves. So when you're practicing, it is important for you to just focus on what you're doing and kind of focus on one thing. It's not like this person's head is like looking around at everything else around them. A negative way, an opposite way of looking at this card could be that maybe you're too focused on like what you're doing. Maybe you're not looking enough at everything around you. And or you're only doing the same thing over and over. You're not really diversifying your exercise or your practice. So yeah, those are a couple ways that I could read the card positively or negatively. And I find that with so many of these other cards, like I can do that kind of same exercise with positive or negative associations. This is like my perfect Oracle deck. Honestly, I feel like after this, I don't need to buy any more Oracle decks. I'm good. This is the perfect one for me. I'm good. This is the most versatile and most useful and most intuitive Oracle deck for me because it works well with any other deck, any other tarot deck, any other type of reading. I could even just do one card at a time to do like either a daily draw or to answer a question or to just ponder. And again, with the poems written too, they also give more to think about. And usually the poems do err towards like affirmations, as I'm sure a lot of guidebooks and guide materials do. But even having a poem, like something artistic and creative to work off of, it gives me more things to think about as well. Oh, also the color palette, the imagery, I love the simple monochromatic color scheme here. I think that for this art style, the monochromatic, the grayscale, it completely works for this deck. It's very visually like straightforward to me, and yet also provides a lot to think about. This deck, the Poesis Oracle, is truly a workhorse deck for me and truly my perfect Oracle deck. Oh my god, it's so beautiful. How many cards does this have, by the way? It has 80 cards, I believe. JK, it has 77 Oracle cards. So I am really, really happy to have stumbled upon this deck, and especially happy that I got to experience it first in the Tarot Art store before committing to buying my own copy. The next deck whipping out here is Shortest Day, a deck that shone brightly for a moment then faded. It is unfortunately the Sacred Destiny Oracle. Ooh, but this blue really matches the background. Ugh, blue is one of my favorite colors. Deep blues like this are just so beautiful, so satisfying for me. I also bought this deck in store. I now only buy decks either in store or secondhand online. I will rarely buy decks new from publishers, so I'm happy to say that. I don't know why I shuffled, it just felt like it. I was in the neighboring county and I decided to stop by a metaphysical store to just check it out. That's what I like to do when I'm in a new area. Just check out any metaphysical or tarot shops in the area, see if they have any decks that I have not seen before, even though I have seen a lot of them before already, having been on TarotTube for as long as I have, which is to say like 2 years, but I've been watching TarotTube for like 4 years. So I like to think that I know of a lot of decks, you know, that have come out throughout the years. What was I saying? Okay, metaphysical shops. Yeah, so I find that a lot of them already have like same decks that I'm already familiar with seeing, but once in a while I will see a deck that I haven't really seen much of before, and or they'll have decks that are open that I can actually sample and take a look at. So this shop that I was at, they had a bunch of secondhand decks, so they were already opened, already somewhat used, so I got to open them and actually look at them before committing to them. So this one caught my attention. I was like, okay, I've heard of this before and maybe I will give it a try. This deck shines really brightly because at first glance, it's so beautiful. It's like truly a beautiful deck. And why did it fade? Because when I brought it home and I tried to actually work with it, I find that I'm just annoyed at this Oracle deck. I feel like I cannot actually click with it. It doesn't have much for me to go off of. Like, let me compare and contrast against like the Poesis Oracle, right? So forgiveness. Okay, this card says forgiveness. And clearly in this card, I see a figure who is opening their hands and raising them up to the sky. I see what looks like a very straightforward depiction of forgiveness, and then I don't know where to go from there. It feels very one note for me. Side note, I have heard that the guidebook is really good. The Sacred Landscape wants you to know. Okay, this is another thing. This is another reason why it doesn't really gel with me, because I am not someone who uses language like the Sacred Landscape, which is so funny because like even from the name alone, this is just not language or concepts that I use or connect with. I prefer Oracle decks where I can riff off of what the creator has already given me. Looking at the Poesis Oracle card, for example, so here we've got connect, and we've got two hands that are connecting. They've got little electric lines or energy lines coming out of their connecting point here. In addition to these two hands though, there's all these like random objects or concepts, these ideas happening around them. There's planets, there's like what looks like a UFO, could also just be a fancy rock. There's like math looking stuff, like with this cone here. There's constellations. Constellations adds to the idea of connection because we have like all these separate stars, but we as humans are drawing connections between these random stars in the sky. A paper airplane, this can also signify like messaging, conveying from one point to another point because the airplane is like traveling somewhere. A planet here, maybe this connecting point opens up like new worlds, new places to explore. Because a planet has rings on it and Earth doesn't have rings, this could be like a foreign concept, a different terrain to explore. So there is so much in this art here that is sparking my intuition, my ideas, my creativity that I don't get from these kinds of cards. So yeah, this deck shines really brightly for a moment, but then it just fades for me as I get past the initial like, oh pretty, oh shiny, and I realize like the keywords and the art are not doing much for me. I will not be giving this up yet. I'm still gonna give it a try. I put this in my nightstand, so maybe in the future I'm gonna try like, I don't know, pulling a card and like meditating on it, or like, I don't know, pondering it for a little bit before going to bed. Yeah, so after I feel like I've given this a fair shot with the guidebook and trying to work with it like in my own way, then I will feel better about giving it up. I say that as if giving it up is an inevitability, which it probably is, but oh well, what can you do? Okay, the next prompt is the gift, a deck you received as a gift. I'm gonna rework this prompt to say a deck that feels like a gift. Ooh, tappy tap. Okay, this is the Air Mail Oracle. This deck really feels like a gift to me, but instead of being gifted by others, it's gifted by me to me. Shuffle this because why not? This deck was published through GameCrafter, so the cardstock is very slippery. If you've experienced GameCrafter's cardstock before, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's very slippery. It's actually very easy to shuffle. I think this deck has 44 cards. Don't quote me on that. I just mentioned that to mean it's like half the size of a regular 78 card tarot deck. So this deck was created by SG Stassi Designs, and their website is called sarahstassiwrites.com. That's Sarah with no H, as opposed to my name, which is Sarah with an H. She has created a lot of different decks, and they're in this like similar style where it's a lot of white space and just a bunch of elements collaged onto it. This deck features mail ephemera from her grandparents when they wrote mail to each other. Let me share the story here. I believe this PDF is also available from her website for free if you wanted to check it out for yourself as well. So her grandparents, Henry and Hester Smoke, met in California in 1941, were married in Orange County in 1942. Her grandfather became a U.S. Marine. Her grandparents would basically write letters back and forth. And then Sarah herself eventually found this box of letters, and she turned these letters into this beautiful deck called the Air Mail Oracle. So this features real ephemera from those letters. And the keyword, the title that she included on each one, it feels reminiscent of how you would sign off your letters back in that era. And for me, who doesn't have any connection with my grandparents, this feels like a way of channeling, what would my nice grandma with hopefully no trauma and no like difficulties tell me. Okay, no, I think that's a joke. I know that every grandparent has difficulties. What I mean to say is this deck feels like a gift because I feel like I'm being channeled a message from the past. And when I imagine these messages from the past, I imagine that like the hardships, the things that people have gone through before, they've been able to get through them for better or for worse. And so they get to share these like little nuggets of wisdom, these little nuggets of hope through time to me in the current century. I don't know why some of these are reversed. I think I accidentally shuffled them in like that. And also this year, I've been getting more into pen paling. I just recently started a couple of new pen pal relationships. It's just exciting to send mail to each other and know that there is no pressure to write back in a specific amount of time because we know how snail mail works. It's meant to be snail's pace. So seeing this ephemera, these stamps from the past, it's also amazing to think that we have been sending mail back and forth in our world for ages. And it's cool to think that for just like 51 cents or however much a stamp costs, like you could send a letter to anywhere in the US for just a small amount of money. Yeah, it's just really cool to think about like the things that people have done and created before us. By that, I mean like the postal system, I guess. Like people have created ways to connect with each other and we still get to do those kinds of ways today. So yes, that is the Air Mail Oracle by Sarah Stassi Writes, or SG Stassi Designs. The next deck I'm whipping out is for the prompt Storyteller, a deck that really tells stories, has a lot to say. Ugh, this deck is amazing. This is the Sacred Incantations deck, Rituals of Trance Wisdom for every season. Their website is enfleshed.com, and unfortunately this is currently out of print. I did email the creator a month ago because I was hoping to buy copies of this deck for my friends. Hopefully they will have funds in the future to do another print run. Please support trans artists and trans creators because, trans people are people and their voices add to our collective, colorful spectrum of humanity. Okay, so this deck, there are so many great things about this deck and why I think everyone should have it in their collection. Maybe we should all mass email the creators, harass them into doing, just kidding, not harass. Encourage them to do another print run and also pledge money so that they can actually fulfill and fund their print run. Anyway, okay, so this deck, first of all, it is a collaborative deck. So there are a lot of different art styles here. And then this deck also has 4 different categories or colors here. So we've got germinating, an example here. We are of the earth. We already belong here. Rooting, we find our way by flourishing and floundering. Blooming, let your freak flag fly. And decaying. Oh, okay, I don't like that these colors are very similar because under my lights, they're looking very similar. Okay, here we are though. Here's decaying. Our ancestors and future generations meet in us. That's beautiful. This deck feels like a very affirmative and also empowering deck. Now, I initially got this deck not thinking I was divergent in any way. I thought of myself as like a cis woman, but after getting this deck and just slowly being in tune more with myself, that is different. I'm not cis, I'm not a woman. I'm just a person. But even before questioning my own gender, I also just wanted to learn from trans people and the trans wisdom that this deck has to offer. Trans people have been a part of our history in the United States for like ever, not just in LGBT events like the Stonewall riots, but they've also just been a part of our people, a part of our society. They contributed to a lot of culture just like cis people have. So trans wisdom really is just another facet of like human wisdom that I wanted to learn from. Also, trans people get scapegoated as being like outliers in society, and through being more familiar with this deck and these terms, these affirmations, these empowering statements, I wanted to explore my own relationship with being an outlier. For so much of my life, I've always been afraid of being an outlier. I've been afraid of being different from other people. I've been afraid of being perceived as weird because I saw what being weird got you. I mean, first of all, I was definitely treated like differently for being weird in some parts of my school life, but also, you know, the way that I see other people being treated for being supposedly weird in person and online. It makes you very scared to be weird in any way because you don't want to fear, you don't want to have like the intense backlash and the hate and the all that negative stuff, right? So this is so uplifting and it's so empowering. It makes me think about weirdness in a different way. Like, yeah, people are weird in our own different ways, but there is so much like solidarity and uplifting and all that stuff that can come from accepting our weirdness, acknowledging it, being okay with it, and supporting weirdness and divergence in other people. Oh my God, relating this back to the prompt, a storyteller. Okay, a deck that really tells stories. I mean, I guess all of my babbling like kind of exemplifies how it's a storyteller kind of deck, right? Like these cards could seem like regular affirmation cards, but the context of it being trans wisdom gives it a whole different context. Like this card, for example, emerge at your own pace. Like, yeah, of course, as humans, we want to just do everything at our own pace, right? But again, for trans wisdom, it has a very specific meaning. It reminds me of how, like, exploring our own identities, where we fit in, what our purpose is, what we want to look like, how we want to express ourselves, those can all happen at our own pace. There's no pressure to decide who we are, who we like, what we are at this time. There's also no pressure to like announce to everybody, to come out to everybody, to anybody in a specific way at a specific time. That can all be done at your own pace. So yeah, these affirmations and statements, they connect to concepts of identity, breaking free from past cages, from past like restrictions, honoring our histories as well. We will remember the ones we've lost. There's so much like uplifting and contemplative stuff in this deck, and that's what makes it truly a storyteller deck. So yeah, that is the Sacred Incantations deck. Again, currently out of print, but if you're interested in this deck, maybe email the creator. Maybe they'll get back to you about when they can do a new print run. Yeah, that's the Storyteller deck. The next prompt is Rebirth/Transformation. A deck you loved, its time passed, and then it returned. I don't have a deck for this prompt because I usually don't repurchase decks that I've passed on. The next prompt after that is The Feast. A deck that's a feast for your eyes, fills you, and brings you joy. And whoop-de-doo, we got the Spread Machine decks by Kimberly San. They're definitely decks that I don't use that often because they require a lot of brain and a lot of creativity. But when I do feel like creating and playing and I'm open to it, like these decks really give me a lot of fulfillment. I'm going to highlight specifically the Spread Machine Change deck because this was a deck that I really worked with this year. They're currently called Spread Crafters. I will still refer to them as Spread Machine because that's how I know of them and it rolls off the tongue better for me. So Spread Machine, Spread Crafter, these are cards that are designated for crafting spreads. So in these cards, we've got the title or the main concept, and then some additional keywords related to that, either keywords or questions to help you understand the title more. And then the bottom of the card has the category. This specific deck, the Change deck, is themed around change, not only in society, like social change, but it could also just be change in ourselves, change in our everyday lives. Then there's the Quest deck. This one is all themed around video game characters, not characters, concepts and words. And then the base deck is just a general spread crafting deck for creating spreads related to anything you want. I think Kim mentioned that she might do more decks in this series, but honestly, I feel like this is enough. I don't know what other types of themes she could come up with that could be better than these already. This is already a pretty perfect deck set to me. So Kim designed all of these cards herself as well. So she just got different textures and brushes and did these backgrounds. So that in and of itself already makes it a feast for my eyes because these colorful abstract backgrounds, they're just very easy to look at. This is especially satisfying and filling for me personally because I love structure. The title here, having some words to explain the title some more, then a little category here, all of that is just like so satisfying to me. There's nothing extraneous about this deck. I guess the only extraneous thing actually could be if we like cut off the tops and the bottoms so that like it really was just pared down to just the words. Yeah, this is just a really filling deck for me. It's got a lot of different flavors. There are cards that are very challenging and also cards that are very empowering. There are cards that are kind of like positive and empowering and uplifting, and cards that are negative, which is, I literally just said that, challenging versus empowering, but okay, this is truly what an off-the-cuff kind of video is like. So an example is we've got some shadow work category cards like silence, bypassing. How are you like refusing to acknowledge something right now? Or silence, how are you being silent? How are you not engaging with something that does need to be engaged with, that does need to be spoken aloud? And like I said, this doesn't have to be just change in like society. This could really be change in yourself as well. Like silence, for example, right? If we go back to trans wisdom, like how have we been suppressing our own desires to be different or our own desires to express ourselves in our truest ways? Or bypassing, how, let's see, what are some words here? How have you been dismissed? In what ways have your ideas been deemed unworthy of consideration? So again, like if we apply bypassing to like some of these concepts of exploring self-identity and self-acceptance or accepting of other people, how are we dismissing other people's experiences or other people's stories, even though they might have a lot to contribute to our lives or to society? I will say that if a lot of these like justice-ish words and concepts are new to you, definitely looking them up in a dictionary or on internet search might be helpful for you to understand more like the context in which these words are used, why these words are important. So yes, that is the Spread Machine Change deck. I guess while we're feasting on just showing decks on camera, I'll just quickly flip through the other decks, because why not? The point of filming videos is to have fun, not to always be polished and try to get the most views or watch time. I really wish I could turn off like the YouTube analytics page sometimes, because I really don't want to see like when people are dropping off sometimes, you know? Sometimes I really just don't need to know. I don't care. So this is the Quest deck, which like I mentioned has all video game concepts. So we've got character cards, and then equipment. We've got power up and status, or as some people say, status, which feels so elevated. Embark, and I think embark is the last one, and then embark cards. So these are like events, milestones, scenarios, and each deck has a quick start guide which explains all the categories and of the cards. It's so satisfying to play around with these cards because you can either shuffle cards and pull them randomly and start building your spread out this way, or you can purposefully pick cards to highlight like what you're asking about this time. I know people will get overwhelmed by this kind of deck. It's not for everybody, and especially like at the price point, I know it's not like a deck that I would lightly say like, oh, you need to buy this. I hope I'm not giving the impression that you need to buy this. Yeah, you know, indie decks cost money, but I will say that this being like my first Oracle deck, my first set of Oracle decks, it was really, really fun to play with. And it still is fun to play with. It's just something that I have to take breaks from because I'm not always in the mood to play. That's also just the nature of my tarot practice. I just don't do the same things consistently every time. I just enjoy certain things. I will put them down for a while and then I'll orbit back around to them later when I feel like it. So in this deck, the Spread Machine base deck, we've got Seeker cards. These are the categories here. Focus areas. I really, really like the focus areas. It reminds me that there is so much more to read about than just general personal life. Light work. So these are all cards that are meant to uplift us and empower us. Shadow work. These are cards that explore our challenges, our struggles. What are we not acknowledging? What do we need to own up to? And then this category is all of the call to action cards. And there's 4 categories within this category. So processing, expansion, boundary, and success. The organization, the detail, the sectioning out, the categories, everything in this deck feels so satisfying to me. It's really a perfect deck for me. There's so much to think about. There's so many ways to reframe my situation and to think differently about my situation because of these cards. I'm also a very literal person, so I love having these words and these definitions to help me riff off of them so I can build out my reading. So yeah, that is my very long section for the prompt, The Feast. A deck that's a feast for your eyes, fills you and brings you joy. All right, now we are going to the outro. So that was my pretty off-the-cuff response to Winter Solstice Tarot Tag by Auntie K's Tarot. Again, I did do a video of this last year with tarot decks, if you want to check that out. I promise you, it is much more put together and polished than this video was. But you know what? I had a great time not monitoring myself as deeply this time. For people who are watching at the end, I'm sure you probably enjoyed this as well. I'm gonna assume that you did. If not, I don't know why you watched all this, however long it is. Oh my god, I've been filming for 53 minutes! Dude, this always happens. I film and it's twice or even 3 times the length that the final video is gonna be. Anyway, off to film another video, probably. Or not. Who knows? All right, that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.